Okay, so it's been a while since I have made a recording, and what I'm doing right now is working on a new outline for this letter R, and you can kind of see that what I'm doing is tweaking the overall shape to get a little bit more symmetry out of this leg, and then I'm going to refine this lower shape down here a little bit because I want to emphasize the boot theme. I really like the way this letter kind of looks from, a raw standpoint. It's very close to being perfect. The upper head is very heavy in detail, but it's very well designed. All of the pieces interlock. But there's some issues with the overall shape that doesn't lend itself to the harmony of the letter. And the reason for that is now that I've gone through pretty much all the letters and added a boot theme to the legs, it's very important to keep that theme consistent so that the letters have a cohesion that makes them recognizable as a single case set. So while the individual features of this letter look very good, it doesn't look good in conjunction with the other letters. So it's been a long time since I've done a video. I just finished my master's program. I turned in all my coursework. So it is now December 21st of 2023. And I started in September of, I think it was September of 20. So what I was talking about during the intro was my progress through the university and the fact that I spent 4 years getting my master's. I apologize because right now I'm having allergies and I just sound super stuffy. So if I sound gross, well, just know that I feel gross and you get to feel gross with me. So it took me 4 years to get through the master's program at SF State. It's an accomplishment that I feel proud of. There was definitely a lot of back and forth, and I still technically don't have the master's. I took the exam on March 2nd and 3rd. As of today, it's March 18th, so I'll find out in the coming weeks whether or not I actually passed the exam. But I have completed my observations and I have moved forward with applying for the credential. I am communicating with the credential specialist at SF State, which basically means that I'm in the exit process. I'm going to spend some time talking about the nature of the whole process because in the past I've talked kind of negatively about SF State and expressed a great deal of frustration with the way they did things at the university, but I also want to put a more positive spin on it because there's some realizations that I've made getting on the other side of it. So for starters, I lived in San Jose for some time, and a lot of the people I was hanging out with were gutter punks. And to me, what that means is somebody who's kind of like a very cutty street kid who, is living very fast, hand to mouth, hand over fist kind of lifestyle. So hand to mouth meaning whatever it is they have, they immediately put in their mouth and consume, and then hand over fist meaning they just spend whatever it is they got. And so it's a mindset that's associated with, it's like a deficit-based mindset. It's based off of what it is you don't have rather than what it is you do have. And so because it's a deficit-based mindset, it's a very, very dangerous mindset because you end up in a position where you're just thinking to yourself like, oh, I've only got so much to live for. I've only got so many resources. I've only got so much. So I may as well consume what it is I've got. And so that's what I mean by hand over fist and hand to mouth. Whenever you get something, you spend it hand over fist, and hand to mouth is whenever you got something, you just immediately eat it. And so that inability to prepare for the long term and sort of think about the long-term implications, the long-term storing of resources and long-term preparation, and just that ability to think about the future, that was absent from most of the people I lived with. And I think that that's kind of like part of being young is like being a bit nihilistic and hedonic, because especially when you first become an adult, because you're out on your own and you get to like make up your own rules, so to speak. But like, there's that famous Ozzy Osbourne line, I've listened to dropouts and fools who make up their own rules. And what he's talking about there is like, you can only get away with bullshitting for so long. So a lot of the people I knew did exactly that. And they had consequences for it. The best example I can give you is Colin. And I've talked about him a few times on this channel, kind of in passing, but he was a very good friend of mine who was very deeply influential on me, because he was the guy who didn't make it. And everybody at some point in their life is friends with someone who doesn't make it. And Colin was the guy that I knew who didn't make it, unfortunately. And this kind of goes back to what St. Augustine experienced when he, reflected on the death of his friend, which was very tragic and unfortunate. And there was a real, great deal of impact that friendship Augustine had with that person who died at a young age and didn't really get to experience the full sort of threshold of life. Another example of this comes from C.S. Lewis, where, he married his wife where she was in the hospital and having cancer. And I think the fact that he supported her in spite of her cancer is what led her to recover and have a few good years of health and life. But she ultimately died of cancer, and relatively premature. I mean, she wasn't young per se. She was, I think, in her 50s when she died. But nonetheless, she died young in the sense that, a lot of people nowadays are dying in their 70s. So dying in your 50s is comparatively young. So, when you have one of those experiences where someone you care about dies prematurely, it really affects your perspective, because it makes you think okay, time is short and I gotta move fast. But it's not move fast in a nihilistic sense. It's move fast in the most disciplined sense as possible. And so moving fast when you're disciplined is the hardest thing to do, because it's time under tension. And that's a concept we talk about in weightlifting, where you're trying to build strength and you're trying to build legitimate strength, not just strength where you can push out a rep at a max value and then be done, but repetition of that rep, which is kind of leading to the concept of hypertrophy, which is, enduring strength, not just one burst of sudden strength and then, collapsing under the weight of that strength, but actually sustainable, enduring strength. And that's the stuff you see in football players who are able to just push and push and push, and they don't fatigue throughout the entire game. They manage to hold it together in the fourth quarter. That's the thing you admire about athletes. I think a lot of people talk about athletes in this negative sense, but the thing that really makes you admire an athlete is their endurance, their strength of endurance. And when you understand what that's like, you really get the idea, the impression or the idea under your belt of what's really going on. So, and the difficulty of being an athlete, that's where you get that idea from. So anyway, the point is, endurance is the real goal, and discipline enables you to have real endurance rather than that short burst of strength. It's the sustaining strength, and that's the kind of strength you need to have to survive life, to get past those really depressing moments and to get past those really brutal struggles. And if you want to have children, that's the kind of strength you need to have to be a mentor to children, so that they have a stable home environment for their upbringing, so that they actually can mature appropriately. And I think that when you don't have that mental endurance or that strength, you're not really setting your kids up for success. And one of the things that I've kind of come to conclude is that I'd like to be a father one day. And I think that's one of the telltale signs that I'm getting older, is that I'm thinking about what it would mean to be a father and what that entails for someone like me and what that would require. And so I'm trying to find the strength to get all of these projects and things done that I really want to do, and build a body of work, a real portfolio of work, so that when I do have kids and have a family, I don't have to worry about did I put everything out that I wanted to put out? Did I really do the work that I wanted to do? Did I really finish things? I know that I already finished the stuff that really mattered. And what's going on here in this project right now when I'm finishing the letter R is I'm redrafting parts of it to make it look better. And, going back to the idea of San Francisco State was a 4-year process. Well, this font project has been going on since technically 2017. This has been a 7-year process. I'm close to 1,200 hours into this project. I was going to put together a video called 1,000 Hours, where I was going to show the progress I had made at the 1,000-hour mark. And I have some content put together to put that video out, but I haven't released it yet. But I'm now at the point where I've put in 1,200 hours, so I'm well past the 1,000-hour checkpoint. And to give you an idea, that's basically the equivalent of working full-time for a year, give or take. Because if you work something like 40 hours a week, and you have 4 weeks in a month, that's approximately 160 hours per month. And then you do that for 12 months, and you're getting into that 1,920 hours. You're getting into the realm of a full-time job. So if you put in approximately 2,000 hours into a project, that's a full-time job. So I'm starting to get there with this one project. This one project that's taking me close to 7 years to do is the equivalent of like 1 year's full-time. Is what it's going to take, roughly speaking. I'm about 1,200 hours in, and I have 700 more hours to go before I reach that full-time threshold. And I'm not necessarily trying to do it for the sake of, how the joke is getting paid hourly versus getting paid by the job. I'm not trying to do this in an hourly way where I want to reach the goal of 1920. I actually want to be faster than 1920, but I also need to do the job right. And sometimes that means redoing things like this letter R. And in the same capacity that I'm talking about, putting in those thousands of hours, I put that into my master's program. So now I'm at the point where I've put in thousands of hours into my master's. I put thousands of hours into this font. I have put thousands of hours into my writing, into my music, and into other forms of art. And I've done it over a very, very long period of time. It's been a very slow, drawn-out process. And that's that hypertrophy that I've been talking about, the mental, physical endurance to continue producing. And so there's a sort of mental athleticism that I'm trying to sort of describe. There's a mental athleticism to getting your master's. There's a mental athleticism to being an artist. That's why they say every nihilist wants to be an artist, because it's the greatest job in the world, and it has a great deal of honor associated with it, but it's also one of the hardest jobs in the world because you have to sustain it. It's the same thing also with academia. There's a great deal of sustainability that goes into being successfully academic. Now, there's a lot of flaws with both of those jobs. A lot of people criticize artists for being removed from society because they don't have to do the same kind of labor that other people do. There's a lot of criticism for academics. They say, those who cannot do teach. And there's some truth to that. But I think that someone who's actually really successful at academia, someone who's really successful as an artist, someone who's really, really successful at it is actually deeply embodied not only in their work but in other aspects. The thing that has enabled me the most, and this is the big realization that I've had, is that the more I have put myself into a position of service to others, the better off I have been at meeting my own goals. When I have other people putting deadlines on me and putting pressure on me to be of service to other members of my community, I am more driven in my free time to meet my goals. And the reason is because I have to squeeze every drop of efficiency out of my free time. I cannot fuck around, because every time I fuck around, something falls off the to-do list. Something falls off the bottom of the to-do list. So when you put yourself in a situation where you prioritize, bullshitting yourself, what you're really saying is you don't care about your own goals. And if you really care about what it is you're doing, you won't allow yourself to bullshit. You'll look at what you're doing and you'll say, I'm bullshitting right now and I can't afford to waste time. Why am I bullshitting? And sometimes you're tired and you just literally need a break. I kind of pushed through my master's exam, and then I had like this period of like almost mental collapse where I was chastising myself for being exhausted after completing the exam, and I was like, why can't I do more work? And the answer is because I had literally completed a 4-year project, my master's, and taking the master's exam, and I was literally at the point of like failure, pushing the rep count to failure. And it was weird because I was chastising myself for not like having more energy after finishing this massive exam, and the reality is I was just super duper burnt out and I needed to take a break. And that's what these last 2 weeks have been like. And I kind of it's finally sinking in that like I finished my master's. I may or may not be awarded the certificate depending on how well I do on the exam. I think I did well, but it's a political decision whether they give it to you or not. And you might argue that that's not really fair, but I don't really care. If they don't give it to me, I'll retake the exam and prepare some more. So it doesn't really matter in the end, because I know that ultimately, regardless of what happens, I'm going to be ultimately committed to the situation at hand. And I'm not going to allow myself to pity myself in any way. I'm not going to allow that to happen. So, it's all, with all that said and done, I feel proud of what I've done, even if I don't pass. And if I do pass, great. All the more proud of myself. But I know I put in my best effort, so I'm not going to beat myself up. And whatever comes may come. And that's the mindset that I encourage you to have, because that's the enduring mindset. That's the mindset that isn't disturbed by the events of the world around you. That's the mindset that's going to allow you to overcome those obstacles and find the strength to persist. So with that said, I'm going to stop, preaching at you and just say, whatever it is you're doing, I'm certain that it's a worthwhile task. It might be really difficult right now, but I'm certain whatever it is you're doing is worthwhile. I'm certain that if you stick to it, you will find success. And even if that success doesn't come right away, you will eventually find success if you persist. Not everyone is rewarded for their effort, but anyone who has ever been rewarded has been rewarded for the sake of their effort. So you have to be disciplined. Otherwise, you're just never going to get anywhere. And you have to be optimistic about it, even though it's exhausting. So like I said, SF State was not easy. They definitely made it a challenge to get through. And I've definitely had some qualms with the way they ran their department. But ultimately, it was a worthwhile experience to get my master's, to go through the process of getting this education. And whatever may come next, may come. I'll deal with it when it's time to cross that bridge, I'll cross it. So, best of wishes to all of you. Thanks for listening, and more updates soon. Take care. Bye. Thanks for watching. Visit theaciddrip.com for more content.